Sorry. I don't know if you I heard that. Let's bow our heads. Loving Father in heaven, we thank you so much again for this Sabbath day. Thank you for the studies we've had so far. And from what I've been told, it was a great blessing. And sorry that I missed it. But I pray, Lord, that I'll be able to participate in listening and hearing, Father, the worship hour message. And Lord, you've heard all the other prayers in the prayer time. So I just want to pray for our presenter and the message, that you would just bless them, that you would anoint them, Father, anoint their lips, Father, that they might speak your words and your message to us and give us ears to hear and knowledge and understanding so that we might have the wisdom that we need as we approach Panium. And I just pray this all in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Oops. All right. Hello, everybody. I pray my voice holds out. It's a little shaky today. And I want to invite anybody who wants to read to help me out. Okay, this is Fight to Make the Constitution Christian by Tess Lambert, February 1st, 2021. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to do a slideshow, but I can't see it at the top because of this thing in the way. Okay, well, we'll try this anyway, this way. Okay, I think I know another way of doing this. Oh, I still can't see the top now.
Is the bar in your way?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the problem.
I generally have to move the bar around. And what I started to do in some cases, but not always, is try to make sure I leave that space on the bottom and the top, unless on a page. But you can move it around by putting your mouse over it and holding down on your mouse button and then dragging it.
Oh, okay.
That's generally what I wind up doing, is moving it around.
All right. Yeah, I was trying to fit things on the page, and
Yeah.
I've never done PowerPoint before, and I've never done these lines like this
You
in
did
the
nice.
document.
I looked at it earlier, yeah.
So it was very tedious and difficult for me. It took me a long time to get it right.
You did good. You learned a new skill.
I just wish it was a whole lot easier.
It gets easier with practice.
Yeah, I don't know if I could get it done any quicker though.
Well, here's a tip: is a lot of the lines can be duplicated, and that's what I do. I use them, and then I just move things around so that you don't.
That's what I was struggling with. I would try to do it, and then like pieces of the structure would just not cooperate. And
I can help you with that later. I can help you with that later.
Okay. So, okay. Amen. So I'll start with a review. We looked at the 3 different structures we've been given. Now, last year we began to teach this 3rd structure. We titled it In God We Trust. I'll explain why in a moment. The first structure is modern Israel. This one is key because it is our story. It's our Alpha and Omega histories with this middle history as well. To that was added the structure of the counterfeit, which she's talking about right here, counterfeit, which meant all we had so far is our story and the story of the papacy. But the papacy is not the main player at the end of the world, certainly not in the glorious land. So what I would suggest is that the third structure is the study of In God We Trust. And the reason we called it that was because we didn't have a better name. We weren't sure this study was that important, and that title linked the two histories of failure. It covered the history of 1863, which led to 1888, and really the history to 1900, where Adventists understand that there were efforts to pass a national Sunday law. Then there was the 1940s and 50s, and then the history from 1979. Right here and right here. In God We Trust was what they were trying to institute in the first history, getting it printed on their money. That work was again attempted in the 1940s and 50s when it also began to be printed on more money and then also became their national motto. It's almost like this is being repeated from here, and I got to wondering if that was a mistake, but so that phrase linked the first two histories of failure. So noting its prominence, we just begin to refer to that study as the In God We Trust study. There may probably be a more accurate name of what this study is trying to represent, which are really three Protestant movements where they mobilize to take down a group threat. So there may be probably a better name. Does anybody else want to read or have any comments?
I'll read for you if
Okay.
you want.
Okay, thank you.
We recognize then that this study without our intention was another study that brought up three histories. And again, the first two are failures. And we know the third will be success. So we have modern Israel, the story of Adventism, failure, failure, success. The story of the counterfeit, which is the papacy, which is failure, failure, success. Then we have the story of three mobilized Protestant movements, failure, failure, success. It's this third one that we're focusing on at this camp meeting. So we began in our document. We worked our way through the introduction, and rather than read it all, we pulled out the key points. So I'm hoping everyone has a copy and has had the opportunity to read it. The points that we pulled out of the introduction, we didn't really go into any further detail because this is just a short introduction before he's going to go into detail. But there's a few points we need to have in our mind. His first paragraph is really stating the whole point of this document that is reflected in the title, which is how did the Constitution go from being a wicked, godless document to a Christian document? Then he says this article is going to teach you that through the discussion of three movements, the three that we've written above, where the efforts change from amending the Constitution in the 1888 history to instead how they interpret the Constitution in our history. This is the contrast part of his compare and contrast. So we are already comfortable, I hope, but we should keep in mind that Adventists are not comfortable when we say what will happen in our day, the Omega history. It is different to what they saw and expected in the 1888 history. So in 1888, when they're expecting an amendment to the Constitution, we should be comfortable to say that expectation will never be realized in our history, because over the last 110 years, Protestantism has changed. And that's not just with their desire for a Sunday law. It's very hard to go online and find information about the Sunday law because that was like the fine print under their main goal. Adventists concentrate on that fine print because it is the part that affects us the closest. But the goal was to amend the Constitution, and if you can recognize that the goal has changed, it should be simple to recognize that the fine print has changed. Because Adventists don't understand structures, they wouldn't accept that. But it's not just our structures which are so solid. If Adventism was to go to the world with a message, those who know this history know that that's the case, such as this author. This is the contrast, and the Sunday law, like the constitutional amendment, is part of that contrast. But then he says, we can also compare, though, because all three histories follow the same pattern, and he explains what that repeating pattern is. Now, all three histories are a core dominant Protestant group that looks out of their bubble and sees a rising threat. They believe that they are the prototype of a true American, and to be American is to be the glorious land, the leader of the world. They have been blessed by God, so they see this threat. It's not just their personal religious status. This is now a nationalistic fight over their national identity. So they see the threat. They interpret that as an attack on the nation, and then they mobilize by going back to the Constitution and making demands that are centered on that document. Whether they demand that it be amended or they demand that people interpret it their way. He discusses how the Constitution has become the battleground where people read into that document whatever they personally want to. We discussed how Obama read that document, which I think is in a good way, and we're ready to begin a more in-depth discussion of this first history. So that concludes our revision. So we're on page 265. Part 1, the fight to make the Constitution Christian. Now it is in this first part, this first history, where we're going to need almost all of our additional sources because it's quite possibly the one we know the least. So this is when the other document and other quotes will be most helpful. We won't go straight into the document because this document is trying to make a certain point. It doesn't give a whole lot of the history that leads up to 1863. That history, I would suggest, is relevant to us. So I want to first make a couple of other points before we go to the document. This is the first quote from the Word document shared on the translation forum. It's a quote from the Evangelicals by Frances Fitzgerald. By the way, this author is a Pulitzer Prize winning historian, so she's good at what she does. Keep reading, or are there any comments? Or Linda, do you want to take the lead?
I was going to say the same thing. If nobody else, if you want to
I
keep
can
reading or if
read.
someone else would like to read, that's fine.
I can start reading.
Okay.
So when we look at 1863 to 1888 history, I'm just going to draw a box. This is South of America, and this is North of America. And when we are discussing 1863 to 1888, it'll help us to locate where that fight was occurring. So this is after the Second Great Awakening. There had been revival in the North. The Southern evangelicals held to the same standard as the North, but they did not have the social ethic. Religion was seen as a matter of the individual relationship to God and to Christ as a personal savior. What was strange was that this actually created a lot of unity in the South. The South economy is based almost entirely on agriculture. It's largely rural with small towns, small communities. Because of this limited economy, not many Northerners migrated south. There's very little industry in the South, and very few immigrants are interested in coming to the South. So, over decades, a stronger and stronger bubble forms around the South. Its white inhabitants were almost entirely from England or Scotland, not immigrants from other parts of Europe or anywhere, and those white inhabitants built the state schools and most of the colleges, and they created in the South this culture where there was no separate intellectual class, a culture where no one questioned because there were so many things tightly connecting this Southern community, with little impact from things like immigration or migration. So there's very little debate in the South. The Bible was an infallible guide, and the church taught what was written in it. So by the time this bubble had formed, when a Southerner came into contact with someone who believed differently, which was strange for them, they would conclude that those others were not Christians. So a Southerner would not consider an Adventist to be a Christian, or even someone in their same denomination who believed differently to them. So this social cohesion, combined with their growing unity on slavery, the author says that by 1840, there was a Southern identity, a Southern region as well. She says this isolation lasted well into the 20th century. It didn't end by 1900. It retained its strength, and to some degree, there's remnant of it today. So by 1840, there was a South, and she suggests there wasn't a North and South because the North never had the cohesion that unified identity. So there was a South and the rest of the country. Of course, we know this because by 1861, they think they are their own country. Because of this, now I'm not reading, I'm paraphrasing from different sources. There was not this fight in the South. You could argue the South already had its church-state relationship. If you wanted to think that if the Alpha history had not been a history of failure, I think we could see that the 1850 compromise would have been successful, which means the South would have been in control of power in the United States, and the South, from well before 1840, had developed a church-state relationship. A.T. Jones is going to lay out how the drive for the Sunday law progressed by states and then through countries. He said Australia is the last place it reached. It began in the States, and in the States, it began in Arkansas, and then spread Mississippi, etc. The South had long been developing the church-state relationship. By the Civil War, it's impenetrable. From 1863, it begins to lose that Civil War, and now they have another thing uniting them: pain and wounded pride. So even after the Civil War, they created an even stronger shield around their regional identity, an even stronger bubble. That is why she says that this bubble extends well into the 20th century. The point I'm making is that especially in 1863, but all the way to 1900, this is largely a Northern fight against church and state, because in the South, there hasn't really been any question. So as we go through this history, we are mostly discussing a Northern fight. The South already had it in our Alpha history enough to already fulfill prophecy. The South fails. 1888, this is a Northern fight impacting the South, of course. So the document doesn't make that clear to us. Another point I want to make is going back to 1798. We're mainly discussing the Presbyterians. The Presbyterians had three major schisms in their history, three major splits. The first split they had was in the First Great Awakening back in the early 1700s, earlier. This is called the Old Side, New Side controversy. So Old Side like the conservatives, New Side like those changing the message. First Great Awakening, Old Side, New Side split. The second split they had was in the Second Great Awakening, which began around 1798 through 1840. So the first split was the First Great Awakening, and this is Old Side versus New Side. The second split with the Second Great Awakening, and this was Old School, New School. Again, it's those trying to change the message and those trying to conserve the message. The third split, this occurred in the early 20th century, 1920s and 30s particularly, and this is known as the fundamentalist modernist controversy. Again, those trying to conserve the message, those progressives progressing with the message. The point I was trying to make in the Oceania series was that Protestantism has tended to not be united, but is divided at least into two camps, just as it is now when you have church opposed to Trump and churches that gave Trump power. It's just the same continuation of what had been the split issue in Protestantism since the early 1700s. We're not going to worry about the first one, but it's the Second Great Awakening that also Adventism came out of. It's the Second Great Awakening that introduced the concept of camp meetings. Up to 20,000 people attending camp meetings led by people such as Charles Finney, who is one of the key leaders of the Second Great Awakening. Adventism did not invent the camp meeting. That came from the Second Great Awakening. Most of Protestantism was doing that before we were, but we also took part in that, and Adventism is one of two religions with Mormonism that came out of the Second Great Awakening. So just the 2 points we've made so far. Protestantism has been split through its history. The fight is largely in the North because the South had surrendered to church and state long before the Civil War began. Another quote by Francis Fitzgerald: "The Second Great Awakening was essentially a revolt against the Calvinist establishment." So as I said, we're ignoring this first one. It's not in the time of the end. This one's in our Alpha history. The highest creed of Protestantism was essentially Calvinism. I don't want to go into the complexities of why, but it's Calvinism that was the creed of Protestantism. So it's the Second Great Awakening, the Old School, New School, that the Adventists came out of, and were Calvinists.
Question.
Yeah.
Were you through?
Yes.
Were you through with?
Yes. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So the Jehovah's Witnesses, they didn't come out of the Great Awakening. They came out of. Did they come out of the? I know they came out of. I thought they came out with the Mormons, but.
I believe they came out of Adventism. That's what I recall hearing years back.
And that was
were-
on a different split time.
Yeah, they were like an offshoot or something. That's the way I used to hear people talk about it. They
Yeah.
had some things in common, but then they didn't like other things that Adventists were doing. And I think, well, the Trinity doctrine comes to mind that, you know, Adventists kind of hold to that, and then the Jehovah's Witnesses adamantly don't. I mean, I'm very familiar with all that because I was kind of in that group for 20 years that was rejecting Trinity and everything. And so,
Ye-
yeah.
Yeah,
that's-
I don't know. I don't know where the divide was, whether it was Trinity or not, but I do believe that they have the same root. I did study with the Jehovah's Witnesses before I became a Seventh-day Adventist, and there was many of the doctrines are same. Let's see, like the jewelry. I remember that was the belief in jewelry. That was the same, and there was others. That was same as the Adventists.
State of the Dead as well.
Yeah, that's right. State of the Dead. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, and I this is kind of timely right now because as I'm doing this presentation or working on it, I'm also reading Fitzgerald's book. I'm into, I think, second chapter, and I'm reading through it. It was either that book or something else I was reading, but as I'm reading through it, I'm like, yeah, this, and they're talking about, and he's talking about, or she's talking about Calvinism and things, and I'm like, wow, this sounds like modern Adventism. There's so many things about it that seem to, ring a bell with, my experiences in Adventism and, where we were before we, switched to, where we're at right now. So, yeah, it's just something that struck me very strongly.
Isn't Calvinism, I'm just trying to keep things in my memory, where where they believe you're destined to be saved or lost, already predestined by God, so they omit the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Isn't that Calvinism? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I know that's mentioned in this, in this presentation somewhere, and it may already have been mentioned, but yeah, it's one of the things that they held on to, and yeah, I mean, Adventists don't, that's not one of the things that Adventists are strongly, that Adventists believe, but there's other things that seem to be Calvinist that struck me as, being the way modern Adventists think. Because this is all, and if I had to say it in one simple statement, I would say that evangelical thinking today, which kind of stems from all of that, is so similar to the way Adventists think. Right now. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but that's, kind of what I'm thinking as I'm studying through these things.
Yes, well, since the 1950s, 56, 57, since Adventists did not want to be called a cult anymore, I know that they pretty much joined hands with apostate Protestantism.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The whole Barnhouse Martin thing in the 50s was a real, surge in that direction,
Yes.
which I'm also very familiar with that. I was very into studying 1888 and that period of time, and I never knew why. I never knew all this other background history on the evangelicals. That was where all this was coming from. But now I can definitely see, where Adventists have gotten it and how it's infiltrated things. Okay, is there any other comments, or would anybody like to read the next part of presentation? I'll just see something. I might have made a mistake. No, okay. This wasn't working. Wait a minute. Okay, that was the
When
one.
you were just on, is the one that he.
Yeah, this is the one we were just on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay. Does anybody else like to read, or I could read?
I can read some.
Okay.
So especially the Presbyterians, but the leadership she refers to as the Calvinist establishment holds strictly to that Calvinism. And the Second Great Awakening was a revolt against that. So the Second Great Awakening is not this history of unity with Protestantism where they're doing a great work. It's an internal fight. It's described as like the religious people had the religious revolution after the American Revolution, because a key doctrine of Calvinism was predestination. Now in the American Revolution, there was this revolutionary idea introduced that people had free will. They could decide for themselves on personal and political matters. So as they come out of the revolution, where they wake up to this newfound freedom by the 1790s, people are starting to feel uncomfortable with Calvinism. That teaches you have no freedom to decide whether you go to heaven or to hell. God decided long ago, and nothing you can do change that. Nothing you do can change that. This conflicts with the freedom they had experienced from the American Revolution. So some charismatic leaders rise up, and we mentioned before Charles Finney. He's described as a New School Presbyterian. He departed from traditional Calvinist theology by teaching that people have free will to choose salvation. So he says people have free will in religious matters as well as the political and the personal. It is in some ways, somebody gonna say something?
Finish your sentence. I pre-jumped you, but I'll say something after this last sentence. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It is in some ways an extension of the American Revolution.
I was thinking how Calvinism is like a hellish doctrine, because if you think you're predestined for hell, then you would just like there's no hope in a doctrine like that. You know what I mean? There's no Christ in that doctrine, because it's Christ who saves us and finds us. And it's just really sad that people could believe that that you have no choice, or that you can't change, or that God would already predetermine you're born to hell. Awful.
Yeah. In the link,
Well,
in the link that she shows here from the American Revolution, the idea of freedom, this just null and voided that. I think Linda was going to say something.
Well, I wonder, how do you even know? I mean, yeah, okay, let's say we're all Calvinists, and how does Elaine know she's predestined to go in one direction, and I know I'm predestined to go in another direction, and same thing for the rest of us? How do you know? I mean, how do people decide this?
Yeah, I think it was saying it teaches that you have no freedom to decide. So you're not going to know when. I don't know that you're going to know either way. God decided long ago. Nothing you can do changes that. This conflicts with the freedom they had experienced from the American Revolution. So I don't know that you would know, or I guess you just are arrogant and think you know.
There's been this long argument between the Calvinists and the Arminians, and this argument has gone on forever. And it's the Arminians believe in free will, and of course the Calvinists believe in predestination, that you just can't help it. You know, it's your lot. They never answer the question, well, how does that happen? But you can assume that maybe if you've fallen on bad luck, or you're maybe not the rich, well, then that's your lot. And there's nothing really you can do. It's a real heartless, if there's no empathy, and no compassion. And in the Calvinist religion, because I used to be a Calvinist a long time ago, I used to even drive down to John MacArthur's church in LA. There's people of wealth in that church. There's definitely power there. And you don't see that Christian outwardly manifestation of wanting to help the needy. You don't see that. It's gone. And so it comes from a mentality, if you're born, poor and, destitute, then you're to make the best of it, whatever you can. And that's it. But they never answered that question. They would just kind of skirt over it. And nobody thought, it's almost like they were all brainwashed, because nobody thought to think there's something wrong with this. It's not Christ-like, but yet people just go on thinking they're the superior Christian denomination, because they really do. They think that they are the superior Christian denomination, but they don't understand that Calvin, he advocated a police state. He was pretty radical.
They believe that they're in this history, they believe that the poor were poor because of their own doing. And so they didn't believe in helping them. Like you said, that they didn't want to help poor Christians, because they believed that they were there because of their own doing, and that they weren't hard workers like themselves and didn't do things to better their lives. And ties into with the documents that we've been reading too, about the nationalism and nativism, and wanting to only allow in people of a certain descent, and leave out people of another descent, because they were going to that would bring in all the criminals, which is the very same thing that Donald Trump said, identifying certain people as criminals.
I could remember having this same this conversation with some conservative Adventists online. The very same thing, and they were discussing the Mexicans at the border and yada yada yada, and it's just identical. And so, to me, Calvinism has definitely infiltrated Adventism, if that's the way I'm putting it. But I didn't know where they got it from back then. And I don't know where they stand right now, because I, disconnected with them a long time ago on Facebook. But yeah, that's definitely where it must be coming from.
It's amazing too, the spinoff, because I believe that God does know who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost, because he knows everything. So he knows the choices each individual will make that lead them on their path in life, yet he doesn't determine it for us. We have the power to determine it for ourselves, but they spin it to where he already has determined for you before you even have an opportunity to change your life, man.
It almost sounds like the caste system in India. If you're born poor, that's where you're going to stay. Yeah.
So now he was one of the main leaders of this Second Great Awakening, the new school. What about the old school? I don't want so much concentrate on a person as much as a university. The old school was led by Charles Hodge, and these leaders changed over time. And I'll go to the quote. It's the second quote from the document on the forum. The old school, led by Charles Hodge, halfway through the quote, of Princeton Theological Seminary, was much more conservative theologically and did not support the revival movement led by Charles Hodge of Princeton Theological Seminary. This may seem like a small point, but it's very hard to find information on such things as Sunday laws. It's hard to know from which direction that drive was coming from, But if you hear that something came out of Princeton, was taught in Princeton, you're looking at something that is strictly fundamentalist, conservative, practically to the present day. This is the fundamentalist branch of Protestantism. It was conservative theologically, called for traditional Calvinist teaching. It did not support that revival movement. I'm just looking for a quote. I could have it for tomorrow, but one of the leaders of Princeton, he made the claim that the thing he was proud of the most was that no new thought ever came out of that university. He was so proud that the university did not introduce a single new thought to Protestantism because they are fundamentalists. There is no new thought that could come. He was proud of that. Charles Finney was also associated with a university. His name became synonymous with Oberlin College. These are two colleges, universities, both in the North, of course. That's where they're fighting. Princeton was started in 1812 and is still running today. Traditional Calvinist theologians established themselves at Princeton and fought for fundamentalism from Princeton. They did that in this fight, but also especially in the third fight in the early 20th century. Oberlin College was established in 1833, directly connected to the Second Great Awakening. It's the first college in America that allowed coeducation, the second in the world still running today that allowed coeducation. Charles Finney insisted that they allow Black students equally to white. He insisted that women should make their own decisions regarding salvation. This college became a stop on the Underground Railway. Now, I don't want to suggest that we're all here in the new school and this is the good side. We're trying to trace the subject of the Sunday law or constitutional amendments, wherever that church-state drive is coming from. When these modernists start to change Protestantism, part of what they are teaching is evolution. No literal second advent, no virgin birth, none of Christ's miracles actually happened, and the Bible is not historically accurate. We would not agree with this stream. That's the new school. We'd probably agree more with the fundamentalist stream, at least when we say virgin birth, real miracles. So, you know, I've seen this for a long time, but there is always, you know, we all, when we came into Adventism, or some of you were raised in Adventism, but you see in everything, you see in the political realm, two streams, and then you take those two streams and there's a, you know, the far right and the far left. So they're not all in agreement even within their streams. But it's interesting to look at the bigger picture and see the fight of equality going on in this. That is back here at this time, knowing the message of equality today, and that's what's to be sorted out, that this fight, this battle has been here all along.
Yeah, it certainly has, and it certainly hasn't gone away. But at least we understand now where it's come from, and whether it's right or wrong, which not everybody does.
It's so funny. Yesterday, I was entering Walmart, and you know how the doors open double wide, right? With those automatic doors. And I got to the door, and so did a gentleman at the same time. And he put his hand out like towards me to motion to me to go through the double door before him, as a gentlemanly thing to do. And I looked at him and I said, well, I think the door's wide enough for both of us to walk through at the same time. And so we did. And as we were walking through, I said, now that's equality. and he said, you're so right. I got a kick out of that.
Yeah, we can do that everywhere we go. We can start teaching people.
Yeah, you know, the boast of from, I guess it's Charles Finney, no, Charles Hodges from Princeton University. You know, the boast that he made that nothing new came out of that university. Now, I don't know if I'd be boasting about something like that, but just to say that nothing new came out of this university. Now, when I've been in, I was baptized into the Adventist Church in 91. Both my wife and I, Logina and I, we were both baptized in 91. And the amazing thing is, in 30 years that we were there, I know nothing new came out of in the 30 years. There was no new message in those 30 years. Yeah, there were some flowery preachers who stomped and clapped and, you know, said some big words. You know, and some of the Adventists said, "Wow, that was a powerful message." But at the end of the day, when you take apart what he said or what she said, you know, there's nothing new. It was so in the past 30 years, there's really no new message until we came to this message, and now we have something new every day. We're moving.
That's another thing we have in common with them. Unfortunately. Or Adventists do. Yeah, so. Okay. Guess I'll read again. So there's issues with both, but the reason that this stream has problems is as they go into the Bible in question, they do not have a methodology to do that with. So they're going to just have a discussion about what they want to leave and what they want to keep. We work in a strict methodology that they don't have. So while we could argue that they were trying to do a good thing, it led them to strange conclusions we would not agree with. But this is about which side you would join if you were a Presbyterian, because you're not. We're tracing the thread all the way to the Sunday law. So now the 3 points we've made. Even the Great Awakenings were just fights within Protestantism. Fights that always work through these two sides, essentially conservatives and liberals, from the 1700s through the 20th century. The South has already given in to church and state. Most of the fight when we discuss 1888 history is here in the North. And when we're looking at 1863 to 1888, there's still these two sides at conflict, which we could simplify by just cutting down to 2 universities, and there were others. This is an oversimplification, but it's still accurate. This helps us when we read the document, and he mentions something, for example, by the way someone at Princeton was teaching this. You know what stream of Protestantism that's coming out of. It's not the 19th century. Now, I don't know what she said at this point. I have not been able to make it out. This is how it got translated, and I don't know what else it could be. If anybody else knows what she might have said here. It's not the 19th century something, but I doubt it's this, what it says here. This is the fundamentalists, and as far as the two sides who's winning, it changes through history. In the Second Great Awakening, the New School did really well. They did really well here too, in the fundamentalist modernist she's talking about.
Can I make a comment on this a little piece? I think that from what I understood is that when she's saying that this helps us when we read the document, and the author, mentions something, for example, by the way, someone at Princeton was teaching this. And so the meaning that you hear this, that someone at Princeton was teaching this, and you know that what stream of Protestantism that's coming out of. So meaning that meaning that you hear somebody teaching this kind of ideas and you know it, what it's coming, where it's coming from. And which is also interesting that before this presentation, I was, you know, that there is a free courseware, right? I mean, yeah, courseware. Princeton has open course for the law, and I was, oh, you know, all excited, and I, you know, joined to take a couple of courses. And when I started listening to this guy, he's a big law a scholar, and he kept challenging his students, his audience, by talking about Aristotelian uh, uh, view of um, how. So it turns out to be that our laws are coming have different. There's basically different forefathers that had this conceived certain ideas, and one of them was Aristotle. And he kept talking about asking challenging questions about race and about discrimination, about police, and it seemed like so strange. Why does it seem like he's trying to defend um uh, this kind of more of the conservative kind of um how to put it, policies, or conservative kind of mindset, right? And I was wondering where is that coming from, and I googled Aristotle, his views, how he viewed the the law, and uh, and uh, and it's amazing because turns out to be Aristotle. He was a big defender of slavery, and he believed that some people are just born to be of a lower class or to do some kind of menial jobs. They're just not made for greatness. And some people are made for greatness. And so it's just, like it's almost seems like this Calvinism has the roots from those ideas. And these very ideas are the very this kind of ideology is the foundation for the certain scholarly mindset, and which is also is the one that is being taught as the foundations of the laws of the law course, which is really fascinating because it is Princeton University. And now after I heard this presentation, Elder Tessa's presentation, I was like, oh, no wonder this guy, no wonder this person was, I was surprised how could somebody from such a big pulpit to be defending, not really defend, he wasn't defending, but he was really asking challenging questions about the freedom, right? And by asking this kind of challenging questions, he would be like kind of like lead people to think about the that's some people just aren't, it's just how it is, and you can't do anything about it, that some people just aren't that gifted, or they're just not born with it. And he doesn't say none of it, he just asks the leading questions that would make students make to this kind of conclusions. And when I felt like when I had a sense that this is just wrong, and I dropped the course, and I was amazed when I heard this presentation that it's really true, that it's the Princeton, if you're taking open course from some conservative um, a university, right? That is, and especially coming from this, um, based on this study, it's quite amazing that this Princeton University is actually very conservative, and it's so much so that even now, this day, when it gives uh, the 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 leading scholars of that university are the led by big favors of Aristotelian, jurisprudence, which is really amazing that in this day and age that there are people they are not really defending, but and he's acknowledging that yes, this is a weakness, but it is still, yeah. So sorry, took so much.
Oh, no problem. That's what we're all here for. I just
Yeah.
wish I
Thank
I
you for
just wish I
sharing
knew
that.
what I just wish I knew what this was supposed to be, because I didn't want to leave it that way. But so, does anybody else have any other comments?
Yeah, about this next sentence that she said that that's not the 19th century Biden stream. Okay, yeah, sorry. It's a bit too soon. I spoke this.
Yeah. It's funny how it's the name Biden. Okay. Okay. Fundamentalists were essentially shut down in the 1930s, but then along comes Billy Graham. And which side was Billy Graham on? He's a fundamentalist, but he's clever. Partway through his career, he says that term is loaded. I'm going to call myself an evangelical, a term that has fallen out of popularity. So the fundamentalists, the modernists, thought they'd won. Fundamentalism was dead, but fundamentalism is resilient. Billy Graham, then the 1960s and 70s, they're the ones that mobilize on radio. They know how to fight, and by this history, 1979, they're back in the game. Going back into the first history, if you see Princeton or Oberlin, you know what side they're on. Now we do. Does anybody else want to read? Otherwise, I'll just continue.
Okay, I will read.
Okay.
Just can you give me a thought? Are we reading from a book, or are we? These are Tessa's comments. That was.
She's summarizing things from the document well, both from the Evangelicals by Francis Fitzgerald, and
Okay.
I believe it's this one, How the Constitution Became Christian. I believe it's
Okay.
that one, because
It's-
I found in here where it kind of began. It was like page 265 or something, I don't know. I can't find it right now, but unless it's in
Okay.
quotes, I think it's her comments.
Okay, and just again, I should have asked this question before we went to the screen. Where the questionable Biden stream is, was that Tess's words, or was that a quote out of one of the documents? Where you're questioning the Biden, you remember?
Okay.
Sorry,
It's not in quotes, so this would
So
be
those
her
are-
words, and it's right around this time in the video.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I didn't ask that
I had a
sooner.
question.
Came to me.
Huh?
I had a question on Kathy, what
Well-
Kathy was saying before she read too. She hit it, the Biden stream. I hadn't heard that term. And if I saw this presentation, I don't remember that term. So I'm glad you put it in red.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if it's like an amalgamation since he compromises. Is it like an amalgamation, or no one knows much about this yet? I don't know. What's funny? What's so funny?
Well,
we
the
don't
fact
know
that
if that's really what it said.
What?
That's because it's 19th century. So Biden wasn't
Yes.
19th century.
I get that.
So I think that's what the lap. So how I understand it, I'll just is that we don't even know if that's what was actually said.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Biden is in red, is because we don't. I'm talking for Linda. I should let her talk for herself, but she didn't understand she couldn't understand what was the words. No matter how
Mhm.
many times she listened to it, she couldn't
I
get the
see.
words.
You thought
And see, this is
you
how the
heard that, but you're
translator,
not sure that's what she said. I
yeah,
see.
this is
Thank
how the
Right.
you for explaining
translation
that.
came out. Yeah, this is how it was
Yeah.
translated, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I personally like, I mean, I've learned now to listen and review all the translation because I found sentences left out and
Mm.
such and all. But we can go to somewhere right here. When I saw that, I was like, oh, it's at that point right there in the video, and we can listen for ourselves, perhaps. Sometimes I slow it way down below 1.0, you know? If
Mhm.
you know how to do that, right? You can speed it up and listen to it at twice the speed. Or you can slow it way down. And sometimes I've had to actually slow it down to less than 1.0 to understand what people are saying. So anyways, okay, I didn't mean to delay. I just was wondering if this was from the document or
No,
yeah.
wow, this is her words as far as I know. I just, yeah.
Okay, well, you've got
Ju-
me intrigued. I
Just a
should write
quick
it
note,
down because, yeah,
a quick note on the transcribing. I have found just recently that some of the transcriptions are different. Like, okay, so say I'm doing this one transcribing video and it's on two sites. It's on Prophetic Herald and it's on the Levino. And when I got the transcription on that one, it was missing some sentences. But then when I went to the Prophetic Herald and I did the transcription, it was not. So sometimes if you find it in more than one place, you can see, you know, like if it looks like it's missing some sentences, go look at another site, like maybe Prophetic Herald, and you might get a more complete transcript. That's all.
yeah. I was wondering if it had
And
to
just
do if with.
and another comment. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was wondering if it had to do with the translator here, you know, now these camp meetings have been really good that we don't hear the translations. And that's really been nice because I found those pretty much catch all the sentences. It may get some words wrong and all, but I'm wondering if it's those, you know, or maybe on some of the channels, you hear a translation, and so that kind of screws up the YouTube translator, and that's why things get missing. That's just my guess.
I just double checked it with the video. I re-listened to it all over again. And even then I noticed a mistake on page 6 I have to fix, but otherwise, you know, I think I caught most of it.
Okay, no, yeah, no, I'm not criticizing anybody. I don't know if Elaine had something to say before I read on.
Mhm.
I was just gonna mention it because she did this one and I've done the other. There was 5 total, I think, right? And I did those first 2, and I have the one that follows this one. And then I just finished this morning transcribing the 5th one. And what I found challenging just in certain spots is because sometimes she's paraphrasing and sometimes she's quoting.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it was really challenging. So this would be the same way because she's going through the document and referring to the book. So it was trouble following it sometimes when it's paraphrased. So when we ask, is it her or is it the document that she's reading from? Sometimes it was hard to tell when she was, I mean, I would literally watch her some part of the time when I was unsure, because then you'd see her looking at the page and reading it because you couldn't always tell when she was paraphrasing or when she's quoting.
I found parts in the book that were similar. So I was kind of able to, you know, and I would compare and contrast. So I was kind of able to see that she was, you know, paraphrasing, not exactly quoting, but
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification, because I'm actually, for like the first time, like getting some of this, because this stuff just like puts me to sleep. But I'm awake now. So,
We're happy
So-
to have you. And awake
pray,
too.
pray for me. Oh, goodness gracious. That was so golly. Let's go. So I just wanted to give some introductory information from 1798 through this Second Great Awakening. The document starts our history in 1863 history, by which time the fights in the North, there's long been this split within Protestantism, which we have summarized with 2 universities. Now we can come back to our document, and we're on page 265, just under that heading, like we all have the book, right? I want to work through this portion fairly quickly and then go back. He's going to start in that paragraph on page 265, saying that in the 1800s, there was already this close unity between Americanism and Protestantism. At least in state laws, there was already a mixture of church and state.
Can I
Over
interject?
the course,
Can I interject? Sorry. When she says page 265, she's not identifying that at this point, she's talking about this document, which was by a man. Jared, oh, what was his name now? How the
Jason.
Constitution was, I
The
believe this is.
Fitzgerald document.
No, the Fitzgerald is the book. This
Oh,
is
okay.
Jared A. Goldstein.
yeah, that's
Oh,
the name I'm trying to
Goldstein,
think of.
that's right.
Yeah, okay, when she mentions page 265, she's talking about, trying to find it, there's 266, I believe, this one. And you can see right here, it's saying to the
Yeah,
fight to make.
yeah.
So I was able to go here and say, oh yeah, this is where she's getting this from. So,
Okay, I can't.
Yeah,
see
that was a little
what
confusing.
you're
mhm. Yeah,
in. But you were in what document when you said that? Because you said, see, we were right here, but we couldn't see that because we're seeing the PowerPoint.
okay, yeah.
I mean,
this-
unless
yeah.
you're.
Can you see this?
No,
you see
if you
the
turn your
fight-
video,
Can you see the fight to make the Constitution Christian?
No.
No, you have to stop share and share the other document.
Oh, okay. Or I'll do that real quick. Yeah, I wasn't sure how this was working. Okay, this is it. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
All right, this is the Jared Goldstein document that, you know.
I know what document you're speaking of. I can't see it. Oh, there, now I see it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that was a good idea.
Yeah, and he did this one
So-
unfit for the Constitution, and now I think this is, yeah, this is where she's taking this from. So she's working back and forth between 2 different documents. And I go back to the one we were working on. I gotta find it. Okay, here it is. This is, yeah.
Oh,
So the other
that
one
makes
where she's
sense.
talking, when she says, you know, Fitzgerald, that's the book. And then when she's not
Right.
even indicating here that, you know, oh, well, page 265 is coming from Jared Goldstein's work.
From,
Oh,
okay.
shoot.
and we got the whole, we just got a, don't go back. Yeah, we just got a 70-page chunk of it, right? Something that
Yeah.
she didn't, yeah, when we got the document, okay. Shared a file in the meeting. Yeah, and it was just 70, like just 70 pages of a larger document. Well,
Yeah,
let
and
me
it's-
ask this question. Has it found that document incomplete on the internet? The,
That's the document I got off the internet.
or you just shared it just now is what you're saying.
Correct. And I got it
Oh.
off the internet. It's all the parts of it. It's just it's more or less of a thesis, I think, not really a book.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's just the paper he wrote. Okay, well, I'm clicking on it before I lose it. Because once we close out this meeting, we'll lose this thing. Okay, so now let's go back to page 265, just under that heading.
Yeah.
And we're right here. If you can, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I want to work through this first portion fairly quickly, then go back. He's going to start in that paragraph saying in the I read all this, 1800s, there was already the close unity between Americanism and Protestantism, at least in state laws. So we read that, sorry. Over the course of the 1800s, new faiths like Mormonism and Seventh-day Adventism developed, as well as the population of secularists and free thinkers. So definitely by the time you get to 1844, everyone's worried about immigration, because through immigration, a lot of Jews are coming into the country. A lot of Catholics are coming into the country. And then out of that second great awakening come Mormons, SDAs, and there's also the rise of a fifth group titled Free Thinkers. So I want to define that in a moment. So he's starting his repeating pattern. The dominant religious group is identifying that there is a threat. The threat they've identified in their Calvinist Protestantism is Jews, Catholics, Mormons, Adventisms, and free thinkers. Adventists and free thinkers. I just want to explain free thinkers. If you were going to go to Wikipedia, look up the golden age of free thought. It has its own Wikipedia page. This is the last quote on your document. The golden age was around the middle 1800s. It was a social political movement. It really started around the 1850s. We marked it around 1856 in World War I or 1914. Whatever, I should read that wrong. We marked it around 1856 to World War I or 1914. I was particularly encouraged by a man named Robert Ingersoll. Social movements like the push for women's suffrage, the right to vote, and they are the political, scientific, and social trends that clashed with religious orthodoxy, caused people to question the traditional ideas about the world, and it became particularly popular when Charles Darwin published his Origin of the Species in 1859. So from 1856 through World War I, there's this social political movement challenging traditional ideas, some of them social, like women's right to vote, which would be against a Protestant's view of Bible teaching, but also evolution. So it's this golden age of free thought that, combined with Catholic and Jewish immigration and the rise of Mormonism and Seventh-day Adventism, that wake up and mobilize Protestantism to begin their first drive to defend their leadership through the government or political process. Last paragraph on page 265, in response to this threat from 5 groups of people, Protestants turned to the Constitution. They mobilized to amend it and make sure that their supremacy is inscribed into that document. This is led by members of the small Covenanter sect of Presbyterians. Next page. Unless there's questions or thoughts. We're at the end here, it looks like. We're going to come back to the Covenanter sect that came out of Scotland, John Knox, but we'll finish the whole section before we come back to them. A couple of sentences after where we finished reading. Actually, we'll just address these sentences. It attracted significant mainstream support, thousands of followers, and the support of a Supreme Court justice. I have a document here which has his name, William Strong, appointed to the, whoops, what happened? Well, we know the answer to that one. Look at those answers quickly.
Getting through that question. Answer.
Keep backing up. There we are. Okay. No, go back, go down. No, keep,
Yep.
no, go, keep going forward. There, that's it. That's where we are. We're on the last page here before questions. So William Strong was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1870. He also says the nation's leading seminary, I would suggest that's Princeton. In the face of challenges to, so this is in quotation, so it's from the document, some document. In the face of challenges to prayer and Bible reading in public schools, Sabbath observance laws, blasphemy laws, and religious oaths, the Christian Amendment movement offered a simple solution. Then quoting straight from the document. The solution was to place an expression of Protestant faith in the Constitution. The movement declared the nation's religious identity could be permanently protected, resolving once and for all that the United States is a Christian nation, and more specifically, a Protestant nation. They never succeeded in that amendment, but the movement succeeded in gaining official recognition of the nation's religious identity. In 1892, when the Supreme Court declared that the United States is a Christian nation, I'm just kind of awestruck here that the Supreme Court declared that.
Yeah, those are old studies.
Making it appear for a time that the movement had achieved through courts what it had failed to win in Congress. The religious right today still point back to that 1892 statement by the Supreme Court as evidence that the religious right today, are on the correct side. They still use that. And you must forgive me for me being awestruck by this, but I am significantly behind in many of these messages because of the reason I miss Sabbath school. I just turn them on and fall asleep. So to summarize, there's a split within Protestantism. It begins the fight. One group in that split, the Covenanter sect, identify a threat from these 5 groups. They see themselves as a prototype of a true American. They mobilize and bring elements of about 11 different Protestant denominations, and then they make constitutional demands to get their identity secured in the Constitution. That's an overview of the first history. In our next presentation, we're going into a little more detail of this first history, into this Covenanter sect that drove for this amendment, where they came from, how they developed this argument. We'll close, if you'll kneel with me, we'll close in prayer. And would you like me to read this prayer as she said it?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Dear Lord, thank you for your Sabbath day. We see how you have led your people all through this history from 1798 as you've tried to create a group of people like ancient Israel who would be a light to the world. We see how much Adventism has failed. It's not teaching and understanding this history, which is causing it to fail today to do its work, to identify and prepare people for the Sunday law and for your return. May we not fail like they fail. We have loved ones, friends, and family who do not understand the significance of what is happening, what you are trying to do. I pray, Lord, you'll help us to reach them in your way, in your time, that none be lost. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, that was a good prayer, too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I
So-
appreciate it. This helped me a lot. I mean, I have, it's just helped me a lot, even though I know Elaine's done the 3, what is she called, structures, and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't know what it means, structures. And then there was a comment farther, several pages back, where there was a different name given, and it was like, that's what turned a light bulb on in my head or something, when they gave it a different name than structure.
Hmm.
So, anyway, thank you for.
Different themes. She talks about it as they each have a different theme, if that's what you meant too.
No, it wasn't theme, I don't think, because it was an actual name that replaced structure. And it was in here.
Okay.
I'm not, it's, anyways, but
Oh, In God We Trust, maybe?
no, but
I'm thinking about when she first started it, she was talking about how she was talking about how we had modern Israel, and she just went through the detail of failure, failure, success, and then the counterfeit, which is the papacy, failure, failure, success, and then we were looking at In God We Trust,
it was
which
in
was
that,
the 3 histories. Yeah.
it was in that area where but she didn't call it in God, she just used one single word.
Maybe Linda
What?
remembers.
Yeah, I'd have to go back through this document.
Well, the question and answers, the way I
Oh,
did
yeah,
them, some of them might be a little on the difficult side, but then there's others that are really, really easy. And for me, as I was doing it, it was kind of like a review. So hopefully, even if everybody doesn't know answers or anything, it's a good review. That's the way I kind of did it. And yeah, it helped to consolidate all the information in my head. So maybe as we go through it, it'll cement some things a little better. So, okay, well, let's dive into it. And the first one's about the 3 structures.
I can't remember that one.
What are the 3 structures and why did they come to exist?
I can't answer that one.
No? Okay.
Isn't it Adventism, Catholicism, and Protestantism? The 3 structures? No?
No,
Not quite. We'll see the answer here.
it's the
It
in
is
God
a-
we trust is one. Okay,
So modern
Okay.
Israel wouldn't that be Adventism?
Yes.
And the
Mhm.
counterpart
It's
is
counterfeit.
Protestantism, right?
Mhm. Well, I think the counterpart was the papacy.
So that would be the counterfeit, which is the papacy, but
Mhm.
isn't In God We Trust done by the Protestants?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I don't recall her putting counterpart in place of counterfeit. If she did, I don't know. I don't remember her.
Maybe that was a
Well,
misspelling.
Yeah, maybe.
It happens, Linda, and we're not
Yeah, that's okay.
criticizing.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
it says
yeah.
there are 3 dominant Protestant groups.
Oh,
so
you're right.
three.
Oh, yes,
So we
but
have
because Catholicism isn't Protestant, but Adventism
Right.
is.
right, so
Christ was a Protestant,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. He was a type of Protestant. We're learning about, types of Protestants as well. We've
Yeah.
got 2 streams and everything.
It's those 3 histories that of the Protestant, the dominant Protestant group or whatever, that's those 3 histories of Protestantism that recognize that there's a threat that they must deal with.
Yeah. See, I'm taking this out of the document, how she worded it. And I might have misspelled this. I'll have to go back and check. Okay. What comprised the 3rd structure of In God We Trust?
And that was Protestantism.
Let's see here. 3 Protestant movements, which, we mentioned on the last slide, which mobilized to take down a group threat. And I know I probably didn't do this,
You're good.
you know, so that it would be easy enough to make the connections, but I was, you know, pulling it out of the document.
You're good. Keep going. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
all good.
So what is that threat that they're mobilizing against?
Well, the threat is different
Right.
in each history.
Is what?
The threat is, it's a different threat in each history, but there are 3 parts of that threat. And I should know that answer, but I'm gonna let somebody else answer it anyway. I got parts of it in my head, but I can't think of the first one.
I'm just thinking of the last group. The threat is, okay, Lana's saying, you know, these people, the immigrants and the free thinkers.
Mhm.
So there's 5 groups of individuals that are a threat to this Calvinistic Protestant identity of the United States, and that
Mhm.
these other influences are going to come in and, you know, just wipe out and overtake, and, you know, that would know the United States would no longer be this Protestant country that these Calvinists, that's what I'm understanding. 'Cause
Yeah, because they thought they were
Diana-
the prototype too, you know, and I believe that's part of it.
So is
They
it
s-
liberalism? No.
they see themselves as a prototype of what a typical American is like. It's not just based on religious
Yeah.
status, but also national identity. You got nationalism, and you know they
Yeah.
believe their religion is the only right one. And yes, it incorporates, you know, what she said too about the 5 groups. That's what they're mobilizing. That's who they're mobilizing against. What history did the 3rd structure cover? So in God we trust, I believe, is what it's referring to. Like it's, you know, what was going on in the history of the 3rd structure.
It would be the history of
Wow.
Protestantism. What history did the 3rd structure cover? That you had to hit through. There was 3 histories in that 3rd structure, which was 1863 to the 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 40s to the 50s period, the Eisenhower
Mhm.
era, and then you had 1979 till Sunday law.
1863 to 1900, during which a Sunday law was almost passed. It linked the 2 histories of failure. That was another, you know, this was another statement that kind of was emphasized. Why don't Adventists understand that the Protestants' goal of amending the Constitution has changed?
Because they're not reading their Bibles.
Well, they're reading their Bibles. They're doing
They're not
things.
studying the external, and they're not tracing they're not, because they don't understand the history of the past. The history of Sunday law, the
And
goals.
all of that, she refers to all of that, all the things we're doing as in a certain way. And when she says, you know, the answer to this is Adventists don't understand structures.
Yes, yeah, they don't understand the structures, and I'm going to post another answer that's here too.
Mhm.
That they're failing well before the Sunday law because they're already marching shoulder to shoulder, at least in their belief system and worldview, with evangelical Protestantism. Yeah, they don't
That's-
understand the structure.
That was what I was thinking, Elaine, what you were saying. And the reason they don't see it is because they've become a part of the other.
Yeah,
group.
but if they understood the structures, they would be able to see it.
Yep.
What document is the battleground for the fight over national identity in America?
The Constitution. What document is the battleground for the fight? The Constitution.
Yep. What caused a split or separation between the North and South initially? what led up to it, what caused that break.
Slavery?
What were the things that were going on that kind of like little by little forced a separation between the
The
North and the
church is
South?
split within the Protestantism over slavery.
Religion had something to do with it. Religion, specifically for the South, but there was another thing.
Was it church and state?
Well, church and state is what developed out of it. They became church and state issues became very cemented in the Southern culture as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something initially.
Was it Calvinism?
No,
No.
Liberalism and conservatism.
it's a problem that's still going on today.
Liberalism and
Oh, the
conservatism.
It was a big issue in the Trump era. Big issue, just like it was back then.
Nationalism.
Immigration.
Nationalism was related to it. Yeah, there's another word I'm kind of looking for, but we'll see what pops up here. Immigration.
Slavery.
The fact that there was much less immigration to the South because of a lack of industry in the South, and this led to the South adapting its own identity apart from the North. And the South's unity upon religion and slavery caused them to have their own church-state relationship. So immigration was a big thing. You know, people didn't want to immigrate to the South because what?
I was gonna say, that's what I recall the document saying we went through, that they just, immigration, meaning even from north to south, that Northerners didn't want to go south.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the reason was, but that's when they developed this little bubble. And
And they didn't want to
I
do
was trying to figure out
farming.
why. Yeah, and I was trying to figure out why, who would want to live up north in the cold, but
There was money to be made. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus they were used to the cold weather. They didn't want to go out down there where it was hot. I don't know, but no, I remember.
See,
it
the
was they didn't want-
immigration that was going on, you know, you had the Irish coming over and the Germans, and they wanted those jobs, then the industry in the North. But they didn't want to work on cotton fields.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I would think anyway. That's, you know, how I would word it. What year did the South begin to lose a civil war? 1863, you said?
My husband says 1863.
Right.
He's correct.
Did losing the war weaken or strengthen the bubble which had already existed around the South?
It strengthened it.
Yeah.
Strengthened.
And I'm thinking about it now, you know, how the Republicans lost this election. And I'm thinking, is this because my brain's drawing a parallel with this, because the war that's been going on between Democrats and Republicans is so similar to the North and the South. And it even geographically matches today, North and South. So this is kind of making me wonder. Yeah, it strengthened around their wounded pride.
You know, I had a history teacher back in the 1970s who always would tell us, he said it, I think this is how he said it. The North fought the battle, but the South actually won the war. And I always wondered what he meant by that. But maybe in a way they did, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, you know, they did get rid of Reconstruction and bounce back to Jim Crow, and it never really got rooted out.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean, is that they held on to what they went to war for, and they've secretly sort of brought it about throughout all of America.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's like things never changed when you look at what's going on today. What was the Old Side, New Side controversy about, and when did it happen? maybe, okay, we'll just go to the,
The
we'll go to,
first
What?
grade awakening time?
what did you say?
The time of first grade awakening?
I believe so. Do you have a year?
17.
98.
No,
See what it
1798
comes
was
up.
the second Great Awakening.
1700s. First Great Awakening, which happened in the 1700s between conservatives and those who changed the message. That's how she worded it. So the change the message part would be the liberals. What was the old school, new school controversy about, and when did it happen? Ooh. How did I get the answer up on the screen already? Oh, I guess I lost a slide there somewhere.
Which happened.
Okay, so yeah, which would be the Second Great Awakening, which happened between 1798 through 1840, between conservatives and those who changed the message once again. Messed that one up. Oh no, this is happening over and over again. Oh well. What was the third split and when did this happen? I hope it's not always going to
In
be
the 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
between the fundamentalists and the moderates.
modernists. Okay. All right, this one's right. What was the reason behind the Second Great Awakening? What inspired it? What made it happen?
Golden age of free thought.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a different thing. Which I think Golden Age of no, that wasn't related to this. Anybody know?
Slavery?
No, I don't
It had to
believe
do
so.
with the freedom in the American what they learned from the American Revolution, and they were when we were talking about Calvinism and predestination. I don't know if that's the answer that she has for this.
It's related, but I don't think it's no. I don't believe it is.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just go to the answer. Revolt against Calvinism.
Right.
But it's related, you know, in a roundabout way. What was the highest creed of Protestantism? Maybe it still is.
It's creed.
Calvinism, David says.
Yep. Mhm. What was the key doctrine of Calvinism?
That'd be predestination.
Yep. Mhm.
Destination.
What does predestination mean?
That God
It's already
pre-chooses who's
predetermined.
all gonna be saved and who's gonna be lost, so you have no hope.
Mhm. You have no freedom to decide if you go to heaven or hell. Yep. What revolutionary idea was introduced during the American Revolution?
Freedom.
I think it's referring to something that was mentioned before in someone mentioned not too long ago. Might have been Elaine. Something that happened during the American Revolution. An
Amendment.
idea that just came about.
Freedom of choice?
It's related to it.
Is it amendment to the Constitution?
No, I don't believe so. Okay, we'll look at the answer. People had free will, could decide for themselves upon personal and political matters. Yeah, that was the reason. That was the answer to that. I was thinking about something else I think Elaine mentioned earlier, but yeah. Free will is another way
It
of
was all
putting it.
linked to Calvinism and predestination because
Yeah.
they came that revolt against Calvinism was because they were seeing that there were others that were seeing or believing that they had free will.
Who is Charles Finney?
He was the one at Oberlin College that that brought these ideas in.
Mhm. New School Presbyterian, who taught that people have free will in religious, political, personal matters. This was an extension of the American Revolution that we were just discussing. What school was he associated with?
Oberlin.
Yep.
Oberlin.
Mm-hmm. What was good about Oberlin?
It was co-ed.
That's one thing. Yeah.
Also allowed blacks to be in at the same with whites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Integration.
More liberal.
Coeducation. Women made own decisions about salvation, and it was a stop along the Underground Railroad. And I didn't mention the part about the integration, but yeah, that was in there too. What was bad about it?
Evolution.
Yeah, that's one of them.
They picked and choose what they what they wanted to keep and what they wanted to get rid of without any justification.
This taught evolution. They didn't believe in a literal second advent. They believed there was no virgin birth, no miracles, and the Bible's not historically accurate. That's why, and she made a comment, that's why we, would not agree with this stream for these reasons. Who is Charles Hodge?
The one at Princeton.
Mm-hmm. The leader of the old school at Princeton University, and he supported the fundamentalist conservative teachings of Calvinism. What did one of the leaders of Princeton proudly proclaim?
Did not have
Bush.
any message. Nothing.
What? I can't hear.
Nothing new.
Yeah.
No new message.
No new thought ever came out of Princeton. What significant thing happened in the 30s that helped the fundamentalists after they were shut down?
That was Billy Graham. Billy Graham was a little bit later than that, wasn't he?
Oh, that was
Wow.
that time.
Yeah, because I know that it was that they were shut down and then Billy Graham comes along, but I don't think that was the 30s. Was it?
Well, she seemed to
Yeah.
mention it around that time. I mean, he had been around a long time. Billy Graham, a fundamentalist, called himself an evangelical. He was trying to escape from the, the fact that the fundamentalism
that
had
early?
died. What?
I just didn't know if he came around. I didn't think he came around that early, but maybe he did.
It was mentioned
Yeah,
about this same time in the document.
It was, yeah, it mentioned in the document, and I remember it surprised me too that it was that far back.
Mm. Yeah, he
It's
was.
just because he was around so long.
Yeah, he was around for a while.
He wasn't particularly popular in the 60s and 70s, it said,
Mm-hmm.
because he was the one that mobilized radio preaching.
What social political movement began in the 1850s and lasted until World War I, led by Robert Ingersoll? This is something I was thinking about earlier. And how did Calvinist Protestants react to it? This was the thing that Elaine mentioned earlier. That was kept. Nobody knows? Okay. Golden Age of Free Thinking, which attracted free thinkers. They saw free thinkers as much of a threat as Jews, Catholics, Mormons, and Seventh-day Adventists. What characterized this movement? Nobody knows? Golden Age free will? What?
No, I was just saying it's free thinking. Because
Free
that's,
thinking? Oh, they supported women's suffrage and the right to vote. Okay. I mean, I had forgotten that. What did Protestants do in reaction to this new movement? They mobilized to amend the Constitution so that their primacy was inscribed into that document, especially the Covenanters sect of Presbyterians who came out of Scotland. That was the end. So hopefully that was a
Presentation, thank
Yeah.
Very
Thank
good
you.
presentation, Linda. Good
Thank you.
questions, made us think.
Yeah.
probably do
good
better
question.
on the question and answers next time.
Oh, you did a great job. Well, thank you. It made you think, you
Yeah.
can't make the questions easy. So we won't be
Yeah,
thinking.
if I really had a lot of time, I could have done multiple choice, but this was
No,
the way
no,
it
it's
came.
better
It,
to,
it does. It's good to make us think. I would love to do more of this in the ones that I do. It's a matter of time to get them done. So I appreciate the Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anytime.
it helps it really helps the person doing the presentation too,
Yes, it does.
to get all the thoughts, because as you're reading through it, you have to really think like, okay, I want to make a question out of this, and what's the answer, and and then going over it again. And even I didn't know some of these answers. I was a little, off on some of the answers.
And
to
that's why
these.
it's helpful.
Yeah, because there's so many questions, but yeah, so anyway.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm gonna
So we better break for lunch. We're
stop share.
30 minutes behind. So
Okay.
we'll break. You're okay. We'll break for lunch, but we won't come back till 2.
Mhm.
If
So
that-
we're going to break for 1 hour.
Yeah. We got to close in prayer.
Yeah.
Linda, would you like to close in prayer?
Okay. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for Sabbath and for the ability to get together and share and rehearse these thoughts and ideas. And we pray that, we'll walk away from this remembering, as much as possible, so that when we're called upon to teach and discuss these things in the future, some of it at least will stick. Maybe not all, but we pray as much as possible that we'll carry this to the next level as we continue to learn, and we can keep building upon all these ideas, and hopefully as we keep reading and studying on our own, we'll understand these things better. I thank you for the freedom to continue to do this. And I pray that we will be ready when the time comes and we have to take this message to the world. And I know we don't have much time. And for me, time is something I have less and less of every day. This week has been a crunch, and I was so tired, I ended up having to take a nap this morning. And I pray you'll help me to get better at doing the lines and the presentations, and somehow that I'll get quicker at it and it won't take me a whole month to do it. Help me to be able to, when I go through these transcripts and things, that I hopefully can do all of it simultaneously and get it done much quicker, and still be able to come up with the questions and answers to help myself, if not others. I pray you'll be with us in the next part of our presentation, and that I didn't have a lot of time to work on this week, so that we can all learn more about gender and sex and equality. I thank you, Father, for hearing and answering my prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.